it's so true. And even all these years doing this, just in that experience, and by the way, I know there's not 2.3 million people in prison, that was in 2019. But, you know, just as one example about things that that you look at and you're like, why is this happening? If you think about it objectively, we met a man named Henry Montgomery who was locked up when he was 17 years old, the month that JFK was assassinated. And he was a scared young man in the Deep South, thought a white guy was going to attack him. He had his grandfather's gun, he shot him. He hid the gun in his grandfather's barn, and the town looked for every black teenager in the entire town. And he comes forward and he says, I did it. I hid the gun up there in the barn, and he went to prison. At first he faced the death penalty. But when we got there in 2019, he was still there. And what was interesting about Henry was that he was sentenced to life without parole as a juvenile. Miller versus Alabama, for the lawyers in here, says that you can't sentence a juvenile to life without parole. Montgomery sued, Montgomery versus Louisiana became the successor to that to make that law retroactive. So hundreds of people got out of prison under Montgomery versus Louisiana. But when we got there, Henry Montgomery was still in prison. And in fact, Lester was with him. We were both with him the day he had his parole hearing. There's in Louisiana at the time, you needed a consensus of 3 parole officers to say yes, to get out. He could hardly hear, he was deaf. First person to, you know, guy had spent 60 years, old man, sweet. First parole officer says, Mr. Montgomery, good luck to you. Go on with your life. Second guy said, Mr. Montgomery, I think you've done enough, thank you. Go on with your life, good luck to you. Third guy says, Mr. Montgomery, I think you need more programming. That guy by his day job is a physical therapist, by the way. And he was denied parole. And he spent another 2 years in prison.
And I met him minutes after he walked out of that parole hearing. And he was describing how he had essentially packed his bags. He was ready to go. And you know, what I felt there was not necessarily a sympathy, but I was seeing people who I'd never seen before. You know, being in that prison, hearing personal stories, and it's almost chilling when you realize, you know, how close all of our lives are intertwined, and what might have been for them. And I think seeing these old men also was a strange experience, because you don't think about it when somebody gets sentenced to life in prison. They're life in prison, and you know, society's better for it. But to suddenly see eye to eye with people in their twilight years, whose only life they've really known has been behind bars, it's an eye opener. And one of the things that, you know, we did the Sing Sing town hall. I have in my office hanging a picture of that town hall, and you see the incarcerated individuals, and you see the audience, and each one of those individuals wrote me a note on this picture, and most of them were of thank you for seeing us, thank you for listening to us. Nobody came up to me and said, hey, I'm innocent. They just appreciated being heard and seen, and to have their stories told in a way they haven't been told before.
I mean, you're a hero to most people in prison because they see your stories. You know, and that's it, you bring up I'm innocent. It's interesting, these tropes, these narrative matters, right? So many times I've said to people, oh yeah, this guy's innocent. Oh yeah, everybody in prison says they're innocent. How many times have we heard that?
1,000,000 times.
Right? You walk through any prison, my guarantee 75% of those people in prison will tell you that they did what they were convicted of.
Absolutely.
So like, we believe these tropes because they make sense. But in reality, it doesn't make sense. Science says it does. We know people age out of crime. We know Henry Montgomery is not a threat to anybody, right? So why is he still in prison? What are we doing as a society? You know, and at the end of the day, these conversations remind me that we're talking about policy. We're talking about what doesn't make sense. All of these things are about people. it affects human beings, their families, their communities, all of society in ways that's hard to measure. Lester and I did a story in 2022 about a young black man named Anton Black on the eastern shore of Maryland. He was 19 years old, he had schizophrenia. It was in Greensboro, Maryland, a 4-person police force. Harriet Tubman's Underground Railroad literally ran through Greensboro. And they were about to hire a new officer. And the black community and the NAACP says, you can't hire this guy. Look at what he did in Delaware 2 years ago. And what he did was he kicked a man in the face who was on his hands and knees like it was a field goal and his head was the football. And
the video existed.
And the video existed, yeah. And he was arrested, the cop, he was acquitted in Delaware. And he was ordered never to be, he was given a couple $100,000 and said, you can never be a cop here again. So he drove 20 miles over the state line and got a job in Greensboro. And the black community came out, the NAACP came out and said, you can't hire this guy, he's gonna kill somebody. 6 months later, Anton was dead. That was a hard story to get done, and there's only one reason we got it done. Lester became a champion for it, thank God, and we aired it. Again, nominated for an Emmy that didn't win, but whatever. Not saying I'm bitter about that. No, but the reason I'm bringing this up is because when we talk about narrative and how it affects human beings, people don't, like, I don't know if anybody has ever seen a primetime hour about a young black man dead at the hands of police who's not named George Floyd, right? And it happens, as we know, quite often around the country. 3 days after our show aired, the family, his parents, had a press conference. This is a 37-second clip of what they said that I want you to see.
Didn't get to do none of that. Walking down the street playing with his cousin. And there's no justice. Nobody's charged. If it hadn't been for Lester Holt in Dateline, it would never got out. Just locally. This probably has happened to many people. Thank God for Dateline, Lester Holt. At least they brought our story out. Maybe there's some more out there. But how do you kill somebody and nobody get charged? Come on now, that's not right. Come on. They killed this boy.
So,
Oh, wait, okay.
different. And that was the story, by the way. It was not, it was getting coverage locally, but it received
It's hardly made it to Baltimore. And they changed policing policies in 3 Eastern Shore towns after this story because of Lester. I keep saying because of Lester because it's true. I would never be able to, this is like the Dean Lee, says 2 household names. I could do none of this without Lester. And I think all of us in the criminal justice community and people who care about these issues know that he's the leader when it comes to telling these stories. And I think will always be a champion of it. And I feel very fortunate to be able to do these with him. Lester, there's a question here. Did witnessing an execution change you personally? And if so, how?
It did. Probably people listen to that question and think, so did it lean you for or against, or where were you? Obviously as a journalist, I don't necessarily discuss my feelings on matters such as that, but I can't deny it changed me. When I hear someone's up for execution or an appeal, I listen more carefully. I think I look at everything now when it comes to criminal justice. Is it making us safer? Because that's what I want. I want to be able to walk down the street and not fear, becoming a victim of a crime. I'm not sure everything I've seen in our reporting has helped me to understand if these things make us safer or not. But yes, it impacted me. Not in the way I thought. I thought it would be haunting. I mean, frankly, the mechanics of it all were I won't say they weren't haunting, but It was more the idea of the state taking a life, looking at it through that lens, really is, to this day, makes me think about it every time I hear someone facing the death penalty.
Yeah, and here's another question. Has innocence work hurt you? The symposium has discussed secondary trauma and harm. Hurt, I'm going to take that to mean personally affected. Lester's a busy guy. Lester has a lot going on. He's moderating presidential debates, and I'm not saying this stuff doesn't sit with him, because I'm sure it does. For me, it's what I live. Some of my closest friends have been falsely exonerated, falsely accused, and imprisoned. My Johnny, and JJ, who I talked about, and I think they're going to announce later. It's announced today. I have a book coming out in September, and I'm not taking money from it, so I'm not trying to sell it. I'm trying to bring proximity and exonerees to classrooms, so people can understand the humanity and what's at stake. And so with JJ, once I realized he was innocent and couldn't get anybody to admit this was water.
Wow.
I visited him over 250 times over 20 years at Sing Sing. And for me, it has taken a very, very big toll. Sleepless nights. I met his kids when they were 6 and 9. They're now like 30 and 27. I watched them grow up. He wrote me letters for years about how scared he was for them. His older one ended up in jail for 2 years. So I watched his mother. So the damage, the weight is, for me, is very heavy, because there's a guilt that comes along with that, having a platform to know that you have this platform to share these stories, even though they're so hard to get through the labyrinth of the bureaucracy. It's my mission. So it does affect me greatly. I think about it every single day. Okay, yeah. So what are your thoughts about the risks and dangers of criminal defendants allowing the media to tell their stories? I don't know if you want to take that on me.
In terms of a legal jeopardy, or?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what the question is. Like, the risks and dangers of criminal, I think everybody has a right to tell their story personally. It's all context matters.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this directly applies. I shared with you the story coming down here today. I never told you when I was in Chicago. I was doing some reporting on Chicago Housing Authority, public housing, and open air drug selling. And we had someone who had agreed to talk to us. Who was a reputed gang member, and we went at the appointed time, and he doesn't show up. He doesn't show up. We see people, selling drugs in the courtyard of the housing development. Finally, one of them comes over to us and says, "What are you guys doing? Who are you?" I said, "Well, we're from Channel 2, and I was really trying to get rid of him." And he kept pressing, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, we're gonna talk to someone who can tell us what's going on around here." And he said, "Well, I can tell you." He said, "I carry a gun, I sell drugs, and I can tell you why." And well, as a news person, at some point you're like, "Well, yeah, that's a pretty compelling story." So he gets in front of the camera, I interview him. 2 days later, I'm in the newsroom. A colleague comes down the hall and says, "Hey, there's a guy looking for you up front." He says, "You talked to his brother, and his brother's dead." And I stopped what I was doing and quickly made some calls. Turned out this guy had been essentially assassinated. Elevator door opens in the development, and he's shot and killed. I go out. It was his brother who was out in the lobby wanting to talk to me. He was not. I didn't know what to expect at that point. He wasn't angry. He just wanted me to know that his brother had a good heart. Yeah, he was wrapped up in the drugs and the culture and all that. But it was a moment that really, really struck me of the influence and the power of what we do every day. Our reach is incredible when you look at television news across the board, and certainly now in this digital age. And so what we do, what we report, how we report it matters. From that, I realized that putting people in danger, children, interviewing children, without parental permission, it's usually not a good practice anyway. But it's something that was impressive upon me. And really, it was certainly a turning point in my career that I matured, like 20 years overnight with that story. It was pretty profound.
Yeah, and what I try to do as much as I can is destigmatize this notion of us versus them. To me, there is no us versus them. It's all us. I had a car accident for the first time by myself on a rainy street about a year ago. I hit a tree, and the homeowner runs out. Sounds like thunder, and I was shaking. Nobody got hurt. And he was very nice to me. Next thing I know, state troopers were there and shining a light in my eyes. It was a county road, and little did I know that the homeowner said to the cops, I think he's drunk. It was a Sunday. And I had had a Bloody Mary earlier that day. And it was 6 o'clock in the evening. I wasn't worried, but I was mindful specifically with the work that I do. He said, will you take a breathalyzer? And I said, do I need to call my lawyer? Everybody's shoulders went up, You can do that, you lose your license for 150 days. My wife is in the background. So I took a breathalyzer, it was 0.00001, whatever it was nothing. Everybody relaxed. The officer says, it's a rainy night, sir. I didn't even get a ticket. Just a rainy night, slip of the wheel, no big deal. But it got me thinking, what if I had 2 Bloody Marys that day? What if I had a beer before I went to pick up that burger? What if there was a child playing in a puddle behind that fence and I took a life? I'd be potentially looking at 25 to life. That doesn't make me a bad person. That makes me somebody who made a terribly, terribly bad choice. And I think that most of the prison population, the vast majority, overwhelmingly vast majority of the prison population, are those people. But actually, I'm worse because I'm older. I remember I volunteer at Sing Sing and helped start a group called Voices from Within with a group of men who were convicted, who were guilty of their crimes, who wanted to redefine what it meant to pay a debt to society. And I remember speaking to Dario Pena, a great friend of mine, who was sentenced to 25 to life. He had killed 2 people. Every time he says something, it's like thought out. He doesn't talk until it's like right on. And when I first met him, I'm like, you killed 2 people, dude. How do you live with that? And what he said to me was like a lightning bolt, because context matters. He said, I was 17 years old. My dad was in jail, my mother was in drugs. I was trying to go to school every day, and I was dodging bullets. My older brother was 8 years older than me, told me I needed to be in his gang. I thought that was my family. I was a soldier in a war, and everybody knew the rules. It was kill or be killed. And when I turned 25, my frontal lobe developed, and I realized what I had done. And then he went on to get his master's degree. And then he spent another 20 years in prison, 15 years in prison, right? So I'm not condoning what he did. But what I'm saying is not everybody is Ted Bundy. Not everybody is a serial killer. And in fact, most of the population is not that way. I want to end with a little story and a 2-minute video, because I think this encapsulates for me what the stakes are. We talk about people and how this affects people. I told you about JJ and how this dude JJ got out of prison on executive clemency, was invited to the White House, got an apology in person from the President of the United States, and needed a piece of paper from his parole officer to go to DC to get that apology, right? He's clearly innocent. You can watch the show, listen to the podcast, Letters from Sing Sing, whatever. But I get this call after 21 years of knowing him. I was close with the warden, we call him superintendent, that's the name, I call him Soup. And he calls me on August 17th, 2021. And he says, I just heard from the governor's office. JJ's getting out. He's got executive clemency. I'm gonna go tell him. I go, Sue, you cannot tell him without me. Run out of my house, my shoes are untied, batteries are flying everywhere. And I get there, so I film the moment that he tells JJ he's getting clemency. But he doesn't walk free for another 3 weeks. Why? Because that's the way the system works. But I was there and spent the entire day with him when he walked free after 23 years, 7 months and 8 days, wrongfully convicted. And so what I did is I edited a little 2-minute video together of that first moment of where he's being told he has clemency, and here's the moment at the end where
So me and our good Deb Jackson, who happens to be the OD, she gets to experience this after so many years. We're going to tell JJ Velasquez that he got executive clemency today. We just were notified minutes ago, half an hour ago, where I called you, you're here. I have to say, in my 40 years of service, this is one of the more exciting times in my whole entire career.
Why is it so?
Because I know he doesn't belong here. Because I know he doesn't belong here, and he's going to do fantastic things.
How does it feel to be the one that's
I'm overwhelmed. I really am. Right? See, she said, I have goosebumps. I said, you don't even know. I've been working with him for 9 years. You're being transferred.
Where?
You don't know?
No.
You know where 50 Overlook Road is in Haverstraw, New York?
Absolutely.
That's where you're going, bro.
Thank you, man.
Let's move in. God bless you. You deserve it.